Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Good evening, welcome back again. My name is Jemima Beatrice. I'm your host this evening. We have in studio this evening with Linda Baumann, who's a human rights activist. She'll be speaking to us about the rights of sexual minorities and some of the issues that came up in the last few days, including the homophobic attack on a socialite, OC Ebs. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Baumann. Ms. Baumann, you are familiar with the tweet by musician Top Cherry last week.
Yes.
Can you tell us what do you make of that tweet?
Firstly, it is not Top Cherry's place to out anybody's private life. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. Secondly, Top Cherry should have thought and familiarize herself on the status of homosexuality, but also broadly how homophobia and transphobia is in this country. So what she has done is actually ignite and instigate indirectly homophobia and transphobia in the country, because it's important for us to understand that there's a lot of Namibians who do not understand us as the LGBT community. Mm-hmm. They see us, but there's still no comprehension, but at least there's tolerance towards allowing ourselves to walk past each other. Mm-hmm. Now, if you come into my house, it becomes a very sensitive part. Mm-hmm. And even if she knows somebody and men who live a bisexual life, or men who find sexual gratification with other men, even if they are married, it's important to understand the difference between sexual practices and sexual orientation. Because the reality is in this country is that a lot of Namibians have become tolerant but still don't have proper understanding of who we are. And I think for her, what she did, and then claiming I'm a morphe at the end, is just superficial for me. And I think she's a homophobe. That's why she could make that statement, to be able to out people and go into people's private lives, and then at the end try and look for gratification for us to embrace her. She should have just done the right thing. If she knew about somebody, assist that family to be able to move and find themselves in a way, but not out men, because men who are living that life could also be directly affected, but could affect their partners mm-hmm. that they're with, but also the LGBT person that they, or the gay men that they're sleeping with, or the trans woman that they are having intimate relations with. So it's important for us to understand, and also to understand, extended to that there's a lot of factors. There's the issue of religion, there's culture, there's tradition, there's the political landscape, and the legal framework. Yes, it's not illegal to be homosexual in this country or to identify as LGBTI, but the sodomy law has become the pollution of people's understanding that we are illegal in this country. So I think there's a lot of factors to be looked at, but also there's a lot of understanding that needs to be done for people to be able to live their lives freely.
Now, just for the benefit of our viewers, Top Cherry essentially said Namibians must come to a point where they discuss how a man who identifies as a gay man and he has married a straight woman decide to string such a person along and hurt the person in the process, and that Namibians must talk about this. Now, you brought up the issue of outing. Can you please explain to us the dynamics of outing a person? What exactly is it to out a person?
So in the LGBTI movement, we'll talk about being in the closet,
yes.
Meaning that nobody knows who you are, because the environment doesn't allow you to be who you are. And when somebody comes and outs me, it's the same thing with me in my own life. I was outed at the age of 20, even though my expression was the association to being a homosexual. But when somebody outs you, it brings out so much about you, about your private life, that you're not willing to share with anybody, and only willing to share with those you feel understand and can support you. And what she has done, she has indirectly outed men in this country who are in such setups. And at the end of the day, the impact on them reading this and looking at the extended comments that came with it, it's horrible. And I think I don't judge any person who probably identifies as bisexual or at the end identifies as MSM because they find sexual gratification with another man. But I don't think it's anybody's place to ever out anybody. That's why Article 13 is there. The right to privacy is very key and fundamental in this country. Let me speak about who I am, and let Top Cherry speak about who she is. And I think that's what outing is. Outing somebody's private life is violating the person's right and also to human dignity, because others can trash you. And then there are those that understand who you are because they are open-minded.
Now, Xuro Milton, an entertainer whose alter ego, OC Ebs, she suffered a homophobic attack last week. She was attacked by a security guard because because OC Ebs identifies, because he was wearing female clothes, a man wearing female clothes, and the security was angered by this. Now, this happened a few days after Top Cherry's tweet. What do you make of this? Do you think it was a coincidence? Do you think there's any relationship between this attack and perhaps that of Top Cherry, or lessons that we could learn from this?
I don't even think that security guard is on Twitter.
Of course.
That's the first part about me. But I think those are the realities that we live with. But I first want people to understand that the attack on OC Ebs was a transphobic attack because it is a drag queen. And drag queens is a term that falls under the umbrella of transgender. Then you take Xuro's one side. Xuro's himself identifies as a gay man. And that's where the homophobia comes in. And we need to be able to understand. Yet our communities don't understand, because if the term morph is used universal. So I see this attack as the reality that we're faced with, because people don't understand when they see a man not identifying as what the man is supposed to be. So that's where the transphobic attack comes in. And then Xuro's also in extension experiencing homophobia because of the hate speech that was put forth. And I think those are key elements to look at. And extended to that, I think with this case itself, the fact that I think it's one of the it's the second case that I know that has footage. And yet that footage is not footage that is made public for one to be able to judge, because if you look at the amount of homophobia that comes, people were saying that he looked for it himself while this person is at his home. So it's important for us to delineate what people's reactions is, and also not even pointing it to this person being intoxicated, which is the security guard. I just think it's the principle of internalized homophobia that was a transphobia that was extended to OC Ebs, and I think people need to be able to understand, and I think it was important for the country to talk about it, even though people feel that's not news. Our reality is, until this age of mine, I still experience homophobia by receiving hate speech on the street. I'm still called the mafia, I'm still called the tomboy, and that shouldn't be happening. And that happens because we have a gap in legislation on hate speech. But also extended to that, for me, it has to do with the protection of the rights of LGBT people in this country. My dream is to just have the head of state say, LGBT people are part of our community. Every public institution in every Namibia must respect. We've never had that in any of the presidencies that we've had. We've had elements of state amplifying the protection of LGBT people, but we've not had that a commander-in-chief position that actually makes the country realize, and that would actually amplify service provision at the law enforcement agencies. Milton's apathy of not going to police station is coming, there is reference to it, and people need to understand what it is that brings LGBT people not to go and make cases, because there is experiences that we have come to that point where people don't want to make cases, but also at the same time, as human rights defenders, we encourage that they break the barrier with the law enforcement agencies, or we go there ourselves to ensure that we get a CR number. But again, you need to deal with the counter homophobia and transphobia to be able to get a service from it, and that is the reality we have.
Now, before we conclude, like you've said yourself, people still do not understand these issues, and I'm coming to homophobia. When exactly is an incident homophobic? Say, for instance, I identify as a lesbian woman, and I am attacked by another person, whether male or female. When exactly is it a homophobic attack?
Usually is when, I'll take OC Ebs case as an example. The fact that the person slurs out language that speaks to your sexuality is a very direct homophobic statement. And usually people beat you up or attack you on the basis that they would always say something that initiates the provocation. So I think for me it has to do with somebody's expression and telling you bluntly that this and what you are is not right and I don't like you. That's when homophobia, and not the assumption that you and I are now fighting, getting into a squabble in a bar, and then I want to throw over my lesbian, while the issue is about the fact that I occupied your seat. So I think it's important to segregate, and when we work with cases like that, it's important for us to remember a crime is a crime, and a crime needs to be dissected to its reality. But also with our community, we also try and get our people to understand at times that the attack and the issue that has happened is not homophobic, because they put that out, then the reaction of the rest would assume that it is an homophobic attack. But if you cross-reference the stories, you realize it was about that glass that created the argument. And I think that it's just a matter of how tolerant are Namibians, because the LGBT people are not seeking for any form of acceptance, because I don't need anybody to accept me, but I need you to be tolerant that we're different people, but we're still working towards the same goal.
Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insight, Ms. Baumann.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again for joining us. Good night.
Bye.